All right, so basically last cycle we developed developer.ubuntu.com to be a central point of reference for app developers who want to bring their applications to Ubuntu, either create new ones, port new ones, and basically make Ubuntu a richer platform in terms of applications available to users. We were working on a tight schedule. We wanted to get something ready for the release, and we were happy to produce a product that everyone was happy with as a first milestone. But for this, that meant that some of the areas we knew already that we would need to do further iterations on. One of them was the resources section. Right now, it is structured, I would say, quite rigidly in sections that are basically containers for the documentation that we've got. But we are aware that developing a whole new resources section is a project on its own, and it's something we would like to work on as the work for the next iteration on developer.ubuntu.com. And this is something we'd like to be useful for everyone going to developer.ubuntu.com. So the idea is basically to talk about what everyone would expect from this section, and for John, as the UX architect of this section, to have an idea of the different people who was wanting to use this section, what they need, what they would expect from the developer.ubuntu.com resources section. So I think I'll just hand over to John, and you can tell us a bit what you're expecting and what feedback would be useful from everyone in this session to kick off the new resources section.
Yeah. So I think what would be useful is just thinking about how this is going to scale and all the personas we're targeting. So we've got, like we talked about in other sessions, new developers, experienced developers, and people who are new to the platform but are experienced developers. And if anybody has any thoughts and ideas about how we should structure this or any areas we can investigate. So somebody came up with the idea of a more wizard-based approach where you choose your technologies first and then we present the tutorials to you.
John, before we go further, perhaps do you think it would be useful to just quickly, 1 minute, 2 minutes, walk through what we've got right now?
Okay, so we have got quite a rigid sort of taxonomy at the moment, which needs another round of testing. So it's very light at the moment. We want to populate this with a lot more content. Do you want me to just click through these?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, just show a section, perhaps.
Yeah. So, where's a good section? Quickly. If we can find it. So that's basically represents all the sections. It doesn't feel like it's going to scale very well to me. So, yeah, we're looking for ideas, thoughts. How should we organise this content? Matthew, you've been quite vocal on this.
Right, yeah, you already heard what I had to say.
I want to hear.
Okay, so what I suggested, which was in line with what you see on MSD and on Apple Developer on Android, was going for a flatter structure in general, showing more of the topics at the top level, so that you can use Control F to find what you're looking for, and get a better bird's eye view of the things that we cover.
Well, there's like one level deeper, right? Is what I'm kind of hearing. Like there's a higher level here of like how to get started versus a huge list of all the components and APIs.
The getting started is a separate section, but I think for the reference materials in particular, the structure should be flat.
This isn't the reference.
This is the reference.
This is the reference.
Yeah.
So I see this as being, I don't know, right. So one click deeper into the left-hand sidebar has more detailed widgets?
I wouldn't have a left-hand sidebar at all.
So
for this section anyway.
Simply just another list.
You might also want to structure it by, as we were talking about, the different user groups that they have.
Right, yeah.
And then each one having it start out maybe the tool chain that we recommend for that user group.
So like targeting quickly.
Well, so for your beginners, like the first time we're doing that, the quickly stuff. But for more of your experienced guys, maybe C, GTK, or QTC++.
Yeah.
Maybe like sconce or files just in there for the
Mhm.
building.
One of the other things we were considering as well, which might be worth looking at quickly, was this platform diagram, whether we should make that a routine, a way for people to find their way in as well, make that more interactive. So then you filter if you choose X and Y.
It would be nice, especially if you can like cover over one of the programs that you have at the top, and it highlights the tools that they use.
Yeah.
Because then you can see, well, if I want to develop something like this, I'll go this route.
Okay.
So if I understand, just the good mock-up you just showed me was really kind of saying the fact that the level of...
Have you've got one? I should have that.
Yeah, essentially it's my name.
Do you want to plug in?
Okay.
Do you mind? Sorry.
No worries.
And we can also, you can bring an action item to attach this PDF file to the whiteboard.
How to this is probably don't understand.
There's a PDF file that we make sure it gets attached to the whiteboard so that
Yeah, let me
when we
see.
go back and look at it, it's not like, oh, they're really good.
Do we have a URL here for this one, for this PDF? Or could you put it on an Ubuntu OneShare or something like that, then just link it on the notes.
Share with me too.
It's really right.
I think the only worry for me with the flat structures is going to be completely intimidating and really hard to make it look
Everything they
appealing.
click on afterwards is like, I don't, I'll try it, which is the fact that like everything they click on afterwards is even more intimidating. So
Right,
it's not like you can actually make it kind of friendly. At some point, you're going to be writing code.
But at this moment we are trying to make it kind of friendly and appealing for people sort of beginning to come to the platform, so we feature a tutorial at the top. And
Yeah, I could go either way. Right now, right, we need, well, right, the right things to do, what we're supposed to say, we're supposed to A/B test it, right? Put both up there, see which one has the most hits on it. I think that the Steve Krugman user satisficing leads me to believe that they're not going to read anything, and the fact that they can find something that looks familiar is better, and they're not going to, the fact that they don't have to click through all of the fancy widgets on the side to see all that stuff means the fact that it's some of the information that they're going to feel familiar with is buried.
yeah, so that's come up as a good example of where we've not done a good job is tutorials or...
Right. It hasn't, we don't need that level of I think that's the idea from the flat side. And then we don't really need to be marketing to people when they get to here, which is, like, I'd like to see some of these pieces be on the front page, and here be more of a, just, they've already clicked through one link, right?
Yeah. So how do we sort of accommodate, well, like somebody saying, if somebody decided to take the route quickly, how do we sort of, about all the other technologies, there seems to be so many options. How do we make it clear? So in the flat structure, it's just all there. How does somebody start unpicking that?
I think that was that your PDF was that an example of how we could structure this flat structure. So if you look at the, if you go to the set, you can perhaps go to the notes for the session on the schedule there. Yeah. So if you scroll down, it's that one. Oops. Yeah. You can perhaps open that one. Yeah.
So we have only 2 columns there only because there's only enough
Oops.
stuff for 2
Okay,
columns
that's
at
good.
the moment, but eventually I imagine it would grow to 3.
To 3 columns.
And again, this is going to be very familiar because it's what they're used to seeing on other platforms.
Yeah.
But how have we made any? We haven't made any research on what other platforms are using. Yeah, we've looked at MSDN, Android, developer.android.com, Migo, and things like that. But I think it would make sense to make perhaps a competitor analysis of what other platforms are
We
doing.
did take a bit of a look. It's also very messy at a very high level.
Yeah, but we don't have. I mean, we don't have it documented anywhere, do we? I think it would be interesting to have this, to use this data.
To do some testing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's something we need to get done.
I put the work item I need to do. Competitor analysis. So there are.
There's platform developer sites, right?
As well, sorry?
It's platform developer sites, right? Not.
Yeah, I mean, MSDN would be like more. I mean, but all of them would be. I mean, what distinction do you make from platform to us in this case?
Not too much, I think.
So do you think we could take? I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to understand.
So
I mean, do you think we could
desktop,
take?
how about desktop and mobile developer sites?
Right. So, okay, so MSDN would follow on that category, then Android as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
At the risk of being controversial, I'd also say like the Migo sites, I wouldn't go even, I would consider those as things to stay away from.
Right.
Because they did not work.
Can we get a list of developers, sites we should look at now? Just
Sure.
You can always look at Microsoft's app hub for the XNA, and
For what, sorry?
the app hub that Microsoft put up for XNA, doing on Windows Phone and Xbox 360 development.
Okay.
As much as I hate Microsoft, they spend a bunch of money to see what works for people, so.
It's also be interesting to look at those sites and how much internal content versus external, because we've got the problem of a lot of documentation lives off the web as well.
Lives off the web.
Lives off our site, it's off site, so.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, coming back to this, I mean, do you have the URL for that site? Because-
create.msdn.com.
All right, but that's part of MSDN. Or,
Yeah. Like the cost right there.
Those are
This from Microsoft, the cost.
It's their home.
Is that it? Android, Apple.
yeah, so I think Android right now they've got 2 different sections, one on reference and the other one on resources. Qt site is quite good as well.
It would also show like there's also how we want to be, right? There's like a vast difference between forums.nokia.com and MSDN and developer.apple.com, right? We can't, like, I think it's scary to think of cherry picking features off of some of those sites and trying to put them together and not having an idea of how we want to put forth to our developers as we identify them, how the things kind of go together. What are the expectations?
So is it again thinking about personas, thinking about who are we trying to attract and how this site is going to, how this section on the site is going to grow?
Yeah, definitely. And we probably need to look at how people use resources as well in their workflow. Probably something we need to find out developers and do.
So you think then a round of user testing as the one you did for developer.ubuntu.com, but like specifically for resources might be useful.
Yeah.
And do you think it might be useful in terms of research first, or like confirmation of the
Research first, I think. Yeah. We can do the research on some of our competitors as well.
Okay. So shall I put you down to organize a round of testing for of user testing for how people use resources?
And just to finish the list, right, it's Microsoft and Apple on the desktop side, right? And then on the mobile side, it's Apple, Android. It's Apple, Android, iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Symbian, Forms on Nokia, which we everything, and then what else do we have there? Adobe, WebOS, you can kind of go in there, whatever.
So just a second, let me make sure I captured all of them. So the desktop side.
Most of the developers that we target will be familiar with at least 2, if not 3 or 4 of these.
So iOS, Android, WebOS, Symbian.
Windows Mobile, right? They're building.
Oh, yeah.
Windows Phone, I guess, is the right thing.
Try to change the color because. So,
I don't know if competitor seems like we're competing, but there's I don't really think we're competing, right? These are other places that the developers for our sites are using, right? They'll be familiar with these places, and so they'll expect we'll be well suited to provide them a familiar place to land that is like the places that they're into.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just using the usual term like for the type of analysis. So.
And make sure we break it up into the two. All these sites also are doing 2 different things. One is they are a marketing site for developers, so there's a marketing section, and then there's a getting work done.
Right. Yeah.
And this is just the place where you go to once you can safely ignore the banner ads and the flashy demos because I'm in there. And then there is the community part, which is how they connect developers together.
Yeah, but I think to narrow down the scope on this one, we're not looking at the whole site, but rather on the resources section, on how they, on how developers can find things that they need to.
Yeah, well, that's a way to have that focus. So it's a reference. It's a comparative reference. Parts of the site, so you're going to look at, right? How are these?
What I'm not trying to do is to do a whole redesign of developer.ubuntu.com, but rather to narrow the focus for this next cycle on a section that we think needs more development. And I think the resources section, if we look at how other platforms use their resources section might be might give us a
Yes.
good idea. I mean, we can look at the whole site from competitors or other platforms or whatever. But I think narrowing it down to the resources section, and then perhaps when we're happy with that, then have another iteration of developer.ubuntu.com, perhaps next cycle. Then that's one way we could.
Cool.
Okay. I have a practical question as well that I'm hoping somebody might have the answer for. We want to do some card sorting, and everything that's online is incredibly expensive and just stupidly expensive for what it does. Does anybody want to build an open source version, or does anybody know about an open source card sorting app of any kind? Does everybody know what card sorting?
I do have any idea what the source world is.
I was hoping the answer might be yes.
No, you might want to ask on mailing list, perhaps.
Yeah. I tried it with this today, and it went dreadfully. Just like trying to do it in the Google Doc, just doesn't work. So, okay. Great. It's all right.
There's also a fundamental place where we actually are lacking some sort of coherent SDK, right? Which is you'll struggle with.
Yeah.
You'll go through all these things, and they actually have a fully coherent SDK because it was architected to be a software development kit. We have something a little different. I don't know what a good way to describe it would be.
Links to other people's SDKs.
Links to libraries.
Yeah.
Yeah, like links to the different parts you have to, and then not fully assembled, right? There's lots of different choices.
Yeah, that's the problem. There's
Right.
too much choice. And a lot of the research that we did with new developers particularly, or experienced developers coming to the platform, tell me what to do and how to start.
Yeah,
But a lot of them would jump straight into resources. They would skip, get started and do. So we kind of have to factor that in as well.
Right, and the reason they do that is because they quickly want to find how to resolve it against they already know how to build applications, and so right now they're just simply looking for a mapping between what they know and what we have.
And potential for confusion on resources is huge.
Right. That's going to be the struggle even doing the comparative analysis of the other resources sites, is they have something fundamentally different than what we have. The closest that I know of is what Nokia did, because they had just a mess of development tools for all the different platforms. You could build it, you could write, like you can write it in web technology, you can write it in Symbian, and they were all difficult.
The Symbian did a lot of work with application developers too.
They did, but not successfully.
No, not accessible.
And they had a similar bunch of tools.
Yeah, SDKs and tools.
Yeah.
Gave away a bunch of phones.
They did,
Right.
yeah.
Does that mean it might be easier to cut out some of the tools that we put on the developer's site and narrow it down and focus a bit to start out?
So we have done that.
We have, yeah.
Get started, we just put quickly up front, and then we've into the other things, but we have kind of made that choice. But we could be faced with a problem where we're going to have 2 or 3 choices at some point.
Right.
Which resources going to also have to accommodate. So maybe a work item is to look at it around tool-based, organising it around the tools.
So how?
I'm just saying, it's almost like we have a bicycle manufacturing, where you're going to go look at car websites and try to compare them. It's like, could we have something kind of different? We're working to pull together some SDK pieces. But it's probably part of this cycle to kind of put some more of that together.
Yeah.
John, you had some ideas on sorry?
I was going to say, is it worthwhile putting something like, the hardware SDKs like an ARM, something from ARM or something from Intel?
I'm not sure.
I don't know, yeah.
Resources?
I doubt it, mostly because their development pieces are really around embedded systems.
Yeah, I guess we're not really.
We're not
looking at
talking about-
drivers.
we're not
and stuff
talking
like that.
embedded systems.
We're looking at applications.
Right. User facing, user. It's a nice one. I'm trying to think of it. Consumer applications, right? Desktop applications, mobile
Yeah.
applications, not embedded.
Ideally.
So John, you were thinking about other approaches, perhaps wizard approach you were mentioning before.
Yeah, so
Which
it's
ideas do you have for yourself?
well, a couple of people mentioned that, but it sounds really complicated. They almost want us to work out who they are and what they want before we show them any content. So, what kind of developer they are, what languages they want to use, and then show them. So, I don't know. That seems quite tricky.
Well, sorry, what was this?
So the idea was that somebody comes onto the site and they tell us a little bit about themselves first. I want to develop for desktop, I want to use Python, and then we jump them through a series of
Like
questions.
a decision tree to get them to
Yeah.
what the right resources they want.
Mm.
They'll, yeah.
Yeah, that's my concern as well.
The
I
other-
like that top-down browsing idea better, right? That it's the same thing, right? I come in, maybe I don't know exactly which technologies I want to use to do the right job.
Mm.
But if I browse around, and say this is kind of what I want to do, you go, oh, you have that available, it's these three things.
Yeah. So the
So it's
di-
one place where I just learn, oh, okay, now I can go away and go figure it out, get all of it.
the other thing, of course, is search. I don't think the search works on resources at the moment, does it? We don't index.
Thing we do, but it's not really good. I think just
Down.
yeah, that comes from the resources section.
But this
So I
is like
think
any site search, right? Google is better. Google.
Yeah, but I think if we go for a flat approach, it might be interesting to integrate the search with that as well, especially if we end up with a long list.
How about just, under resources, putting something like suggest more things so that people that are coming there can, throw something out there.
I would, even more than that, I think having prominent links to ask.ubuntu.com in the developer sections is really important, right? It's driving more dynamic information from there, because that isn't on this page at all either, right? And all of developer on ubuntu.com. Community, which will take you to where?
Community.
Right, it's too many clicks away, right?
Yeah.
Ask Ubuntu is right there. Like, if you go to Ask Ubuntu for the app development tag, right, there's interesting information we can surface.
Yeah.
That will keep some of these pages dynamic, which is the other challenge, like many websites, which is if you go to them like 3 times and they don't change that at all, you probably never go back until someone prompts you. The other really interesting thing to do would be to start collecting email addresses. Just email addresses to keep people informed, right? A newsletter.
Specifically on resources.
Specifically on developer.ubuntu.com, right?
What was that on
Like,
the,
just start collecting email addresses to keep people informed. I guess we get that some because we have a Twitter feed and not a Facebook page, but just a Twitter feed, right?
I think it all depends on. I think if we do something like that, we have to think about it very well, because depending on the type of person we want to attract, like people from, like open source, people coming from open source backgrounds are really conscious about their privacy, and that might put them off. So if we want to get
Ask them for their email address and put them off.
if we make it, I mean,
They could not put it there, right?
right. What I mean is that I would make it really obvious that what we're doing with this data, and this is something they can do voluntarily. I would try not to gather addresses like in any means, like automatically.
Not automatically, right? It would always be just keep me informed because I'm interested in this and I want to know when this site gets updated.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we could do this more dynamic, like with an RSS feed or something like that, rather than email.
Both are important. You can do both. The email will always be more powerful.
make a note.
And Twitter will be your second most powerful way of keeping people informed.
Do we have anything that shows recent stuff that's been added to the App Store to show this is the kind of stuff we have, and that would then be dynamic? You know,
It's another great.
Yeah, we have that on, well, we intended to have that on the front page. So John, perhaps if you show us the home page.
It's really a link to apps.ubuntu.com.
So basically,
Yeah.
what we wanted to have on this section is a dynamic list of featured applications, but at the point of releasing developer.ubuntu.com, we didn't have the API to generate this content automatically. So right now it's just it's static content basically.
We should be pulling it from apps.ubuntu.com.
Yeah, but I mean, do we have from apps.ubuntu.com? Do we have that information already?
Which information?
Like a feed of
No, but that's the logical place to put it. It's the only place to,
Right.
John's doing some work on apps.ubuntu.com, so
Next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we make sure that's included. Yes.
Okay, so
But just back to your point, what would be the purpose on resources particularly?
well, one of the points raised was that the page isn't particularly dynamic.
Right.
One thing that a developer might want to see is what are other successful applications, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know.
These, or what kind of applications can I develop?
I think, I was gonna say, I'm sorry, we should keep us on track for resources, not developer.ubuntu.com, right?
Yeah.
From the resources page, it doesn't make that much sense to have both.
The only time it might make sense on the resources page is if somebody, whoever's written the app, has written some tutorials or has shown what technologies they've used, and you could use it as a filter for, I think that was mentioned in the platform diagram, that click on the app and it shows you what was used, so that's quite interesting. There is another question about API documentation, but I don't know whether it's separate from this. Because these are actually ours.
I think I would leave that one for.
But they
I mean,
don't.
that deserves another section, but I'm not sure if this is something we'll be able to work on this cycle. So basically, what I'd like to
This
the
is like
API.
we're getting work.
I mean, this exactly. So we've got the information there. We need the API documentation. We need to work on two areas, basically on making sure the documentation in the code is good, or that there is documentation at all in the code. Because for some of these APIs, the documentation might not be very good. And the other part is how we present this documentation. Right now, we've got everything we can get in developer.ubuntu.com, but we don't present it in any unified way.
Could you go back one? The other really interesting thing we have for us is not just this documentation, but you should have links to the source for once of these things, because that is
Right, yeah, if you go to...
the fact that there's no like completion link to the fact that all this is open source. It looks like it loses some of our uniqueness.
Yeah, but that's dependent on the tool, though. I mean, we get it from John. Perhaps if you scroll down a bit to UTouch QML, I think that's the one. Yeah, if you click on that one. Yeah, it's the same. Yeah. So we get the link to if you click on class list, for example, or just classes. Yeah, just click on any of them. I don't know which one will take us to. Just click on access info, perhaps. So this one doesn't show you the source, but anyway, I mean, just an example. It depends on the tool we use to generate documentation. This is just an example which shows you the source. But again, this needs quite a lot of work.
Back on that page, like it seems like a fairly simple one that I can already tell you it's kind of strange it's not there, but a link to the Unity source is clearly something that someone would want to go look at, right? Putting up sparse, poor documentation versus
Giving them that.
versus giving them, we have actual access to all this source code, right? It should be linked to directly from
Right. Yeah. I think that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we can create a link to. I mean, most of these are Ubuntu platform APIs, so we can add a link to the launchpad
source,
page, which with the source.
Excuse me, David, I have a small query. As an ARB member, why can't you do something like a sponsors list, link it to a sponsors list, something like a sponsors list, on resources page for the ARB members, so that every time we shouldn't look at the bugs which are there submitted to review the package or the program or the
So-
application.
I think what we could do is to have like what we don't have now is to have a section, like a page
Yeah.
explaining what the ARB is
Yeah.
and
Why can't-
the resources for the ARB.
Why can't you update it such that it looks more like a sponsors list?
What does
Where we getting bugs by mail or we get a regular update.
Yeah, but I think that's a bit outside of the scope of this particular discussion, because I think that requires quite a lot of work, like more like back-end work rather than design work, like making the resource section more useful for working on bugs or working on packages. I think that's a bit outside of the scope of the section, of the discussion for this section. But what we could do though is to have a page explaining what the ARB is, the resources to get involved in the ARB, the resources you use for tracking application submissions and things like that. I think that might be a good compromise without going like to the full extent of creating new infrastructure behind developer.ubuntu.com.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. Thanks. So let me take an action item on me. I mean, you wanted to work also as well on providing information on licensing, so that might fit on that page as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let me try to track this down. Do you want to provide the content for this page?
Yeah.
Okay. What was your IRC or launchpad?
Coolbomb. Yeah. Coolbomb.
Wait a second. Cool.
COOLBHABI.
Sorry. B. Let me try to see if I get it right.
Yeah. Just type in BHABI. It's fair enough. BHABI.
Okay. Provide.
Yeah. Sorry, got the spelling wrong. BHABI. BHABI. BHA.
Oh, A.
Yeah.
Sorry.
VI.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. VV. Not V. V. V for van.
Sorry about that. So cool. BHBI.
BHA.
PHA.
A for apple. V for
Someone
van.
is correcting me now. I think.
And I for iPad. Yeah. Done.
Excellent. Sorry. And thanks for the correctors.
About.
So provide primary page in the so at the page so Johnny, I mean, is there any particular information or particular piece of feedback that you need from
No, I think
people?
this was kind of what I was looking for, was just a list of things we could explore, really, just get some insight, because we really hadn't spent much time looking at it before. So.
Sorry?
We hadn't spent much time looking at resources sections.
Okay, so in terms of the workflow, how this is going to work, I think what we need is to gather all this data and put it in a structured form and work out on a spec. Because right now, to me, it's still a bit fuzzy on what we want to, what we need and what we can achieve. So what do you think after having created this, after having done the review on the resources section, what do you think it should look like to make? What would make you happy after this project?
Perfect resources section.
A perfect resources section.
Well, I think we need to do the research first, and we can do that perhaps against our competitors, or we can do some prototyping and test the different ideas and see how they work.
Okay, so
we could very easily mock up some simple stuff.
Okay. So let's look at the work items then in terms of the workflow for this work to be done, basically. So I think one part of it is then the research part, and from that we can get on to the actual work. I think most of the work items here are relatively small work items, but I'd like to get onto the ones that will basically take us there. So what do you think the usual workflow will be then? I mean, when you're creating a new website, so research, prototyping, and so on. So what's the...
So I think we've done quite a bit of this discussion around the ideas of how to present resources, and Matthew's made a big contribution to that as well previously. So I think the first thing to do is do some prototyping and then get some developers in and test various UIs.
So create a set of prototypes. You want to create several different ones for several approaches, or
try a few things out.
Right. So what's the next step then after the prototypes have been done? Is it user testing?
Yeah, testing and analysis.
Right, so do we come then already to implementation after user testing?
No, so then we're going to have to pick what we think is going to be the best solution and refine that and test again. So a refined UI based on what we find out from the research.
So, design is perhaps not the best word.
We might end up redesigning or...
Yes, will I use design or...
Yeah, that's fine for now, because I just will know what we need.
And
refine and test again.
How many rounds of user testing do you want to work on?
Minimum 2.
So what else? What's the next step then after second round of user testing?
We're going to have to implement. I'm assuming time's an issue here, so we'll probably have to implement from there and put in place. I don't know. I think we was talking about A/B testing as well. I don't know whether we're going to do any of that. Any A/B testing on.
What's A/B testing?
So 2 different versions. and measure to see which is the most successful.
All right, okay.
We have to decide what we're measuring first.
But it's essentially another round of testing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's done. You can do it on the live site, so you can use Google to serve up one version to some people and another version.
Right,
to others.
right. But yeah, what I mean is like in terms of the broader sense of the action is, again, it's another way of testing, isn't it? Or
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a way of testing. You measure it and you see which UI wins.
so would this be a third layer of testing?
It's optional at this point. We're not.
Okay, so I think what I'll do then, rather than adding an extra work item, I'll just add it as between brackets, think about or investigate A/B testing. John, would you be working on the implementation on this one, or someone else in the web design team?
It will probably be Steve in the web design team who will do that.
Okay, I'll just write down Steve like preliminarily. I mean,
Yeah.